is all of us have to be committed, right, to achieving our fundamental objectives in Afghanistan. I mean, Americans know really better than anybody because the mass murder against our own country on September 11, 2001 originated with the terrorist safe haven and support base in Afghanistan. Recently, we have been engaged against ISIS or in ISIS Khorasan in Afghanistan with highly successful operations there that you'll hear more about in a press conference at the Department of Defense here in the near future. But what has happened in Afghanistan is the Afghan army is taking the brunt of the fight against these transnational terrorists and the Taliban. And so we're working with our allies to figure out what more we can do to have a more effective strategy in Afghanistan. What are options we can bring to the president to be more effective in meeting our objectives in Afghanistan? And what more can we ask our allies to do, which we're asking them now? So this is going to be really consistent with the president's guidance to us.
Has the president decided that there should be thousands more troops?
The president has not made a decision yet on a course of action. What we have done, which is what we have done in many cases on the North Korea problem set, for example, is we've consulted broadly across our government and with allies. The president wants to hear from our allies as well. This is a president who listens to his allies and partners, who have an opportunity to do so at the NATO summit, who have an opportunity to do so at the G7. And so what we'll have at the end of this next few weeks here is an opportunity for a much more effective strategy for the problem set in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the region broadly.
Jessica.
Thank you, Sean. General, if you could talk first about the evolution from the way the president campaigned, which was a more unilateral foreign policy, to this multilateral engagement that you're emphasizing, and the way that you're rolling out this trip to explain that. And then secondly, if you could also talk about the decision to send a delegation to the One Belt, One Road forum in China and what you hope to get out of that.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
So America First never didn't mean America alone ever. I don't think. And so what we have done is advance the president's agenda in national security by strengthening alliances by burden sharing. Americans don't have to do everything, don't have to bankroll everything, and our allies and partners are grateful for, I think, the president's leadership in asking them to do more. So it is an alliance in which each of the members are doing their fair share, who are shouldering the burden. Is it stronger or weaker? It's stronger. So the president has done a great deal to strengthen our alliances. And America First didn't mean America not leading. Right, so for America to secure and advance its interests, that requires American leadership. And so the president's leadership has been welcomed in all of the places that he'll be visiting on this trip, and his agenda, I think, that he laid out in the campaign is being operationalized and implemented by his cabinet, primarily with the assistance of our team here in the White House.
Can I just press you on that, General? Two questions. First, there were reports out of Israel that President Trump may try to get Benjamin Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas in the same room together while he's there. Is that in fact the case? And also, to NBC News yesterday, the president said that General Mattis and his other generals would be announcing something on ISIS next week. And so, as one of the generals on his administration, can you talk to that? Is there an announcement coming next week?
On the first part, it'll be whatever the president wants to do. So a lot of what we do in the National Security Council is try to keep up with the president. So you may have I think there are plans to
reach out to both of them to get them together.
The final plans aren't set yet. We can comment maybe more about that next week. But it'll obviously be up to the president and those leaders about how he wants to engage with them. But he'll engage with both those leaders there as part of the trip. In terms of the campaign against transnational terrorist organizations and ISIS in particular, the president has asked us to do everything we can to defeat ISIS, and in particular to ensure that we defeat ISIS in this, this so-called caliphate in the terrain that they're endeavoring to hold on to in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other areas. And what the president has also told us is he doesn't want to telegraph what he's doing tactically, day to day. He wants the Department of Defense and our military commanders to be able to execute those campaigns consistent with his guidance, the policy, and the strategy that he's approved. And so what next week will do will be an opportunity for our military leadership to lay out how they are executing the president's guidance, the progress they've made in the campaign, and what remains to be done. And so that's really the emphasis of the press conference next week.
Thank you, General. One more.
Can we hear about Russia and the agreements that were made this week with Russia's top diplomat? I mean, you're going to the region to speak with Arab allies. How are you going to explain agreements you've made with Russia, allied with Iran, in Syria, a place that the president has said is now a priority for him?
I would characterize the engagements with Russian leadership by our Secretary of State, the brief meeting that the president had with Foreign Minister Lavrov, the phone conversations that we've had with Russian leadership as engagements, not decisions or specific approaches. I think what the president has made clear is that he will confront Russian disruptive behavior, such as its support for the murderous Assad regime in Syria. And its enabling of Iran and its very destructive policy and strategy that it's executing across the Middle East, what it's done and continued to do in Ukraine. He'll confront that disruptive behavior, but the president's looking for areas of cooperation. There are a lot of very significant security problem sets across the world. All of them would get easier, right? If Russia were to come to the conclusion that it could best advance its interests through cooperating with the United States and others to resolve those conflicts rather than perpetuate them.
But are they party to those conflicts and causing them in Syria? I mean, the president said at the end of his meeting with Lavrov that it was really good, that there was, he spoke in very positive terms, that there was progress made. Are you saying there were no agreements?
The president spoke in positive, affirmative, strong terms in his engagements with Russian leaders.
Thank you very much.
Just follow on my question.
So one more. I'll take one more.
Sean. At the back? Yeah.
Back here, actually. Can you tell us a little bit more about the America First policy, about how it changed over time? Because it's not been very clear what it means and how other people would want to sign up for it.
Well, what it means is that the president is prioritizing the security and interests of the American people. You can see that with what Secretary Ross has done in the economic relationship with China, to look for ways to advance American prosperity. Every theme of this trip is wholly consistent with the president's approach to prioritize the American people, American security, American jobs, American prosperity. And so you'll see that with I think, almost a refreshing, I would say, integration of what we're doing in terms of security partnerships, along with economic relationships and the diplomatic engagement that the president's cabinet has been engaged with since he's taken over as president. And this trip is going to be a tremendous way to solidify the gains already made and advance them further.
General.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, General McMaster. I'm going to go through a couple updates and schedule before I get to your questions, and Jeff will get the first one. First off, Secretary Ross, I know, was up here last night to tell you about the developments, and General McMaster just noted at the developments that have happened and advances that have happened in trade. The 10 commitments that Secretary Ross announced yesterday are the initial results of the 100-day action plan of the United States-China Comprehensive Economic Dialogue, which began with President Trump and President Xi's meeting in Mar-a-Lago. Under the leadership of Secretaries Ross, Mnuchin, and their Chinese counterparts, the United States has negotiated intensively to reach consensus in areas including agricultural trade, financial services, investment, and energy. One of the actions I want to point out in particular sets the stage for China to allow imports of American beef beginning no later than July 16th of this year. It's been 13 years since our cattle producers have been effectively locked out of the Chinese market. China is the second largest beef importer in the world, buying roughly $2.6 billion of beef every year. In a statement last night, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the nation's largest association of cattle farmers, said, and I quote, "It's impossible to overstate how beneficial this will be for America's cattle producers and how the Trump administration deserves a lot of credit for getting this achieved," end quote. This announcement came on the same day that Secretary Perdue visited a barge loading facility in the Ohio River and announced that he will appoint the first ever Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agriculture Affairs at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This is further proof of the seriousness of which the administration is approaching the promotion of U.S. agricultural products abroad. And that's just one part of the deal that was reached. Here are some of the other highlights that we have worked with China. 8 pending biotech patents from the United States firms will be evaluated at a meeting of China's National Biosafety Committee by the end of May. We welcome China to receive imported liquefied natural gas, with companies allowed to proceed at any time to negotiate contracts. China will allow foreign-owned financial services firms in China to provide credit rating services and credit investigations. By July 16th, China will issue further guidance to allow American-owned suppliers of electronic payment services to operate in China. And China will allow 2 American financial institutions to issue underwriting and settlement licenses no later than July 16th. As we continue to make progress within the 100-day framework, including discussion of a 1-year plan to solidify action that will benefit both of our countries. Moving on, this morning, Attorney General Sessions issued a memo that restores flexibility to prosecutors so that they can most effectively combat the crisis of illegal drug trafficking that is polluting our cities and destroying our communities and families. This policy was formulated after extensive consultation with the prosecutors that handle these cases each and every day around the country. With these additional options available to them, they now have the leverage they need to get at the root of drug trafficking and the violent crime that surrounds it. As the Attorney General said this morning, this will take the handcuffs off our nation's prosecutors, and if I can add, it frankly puts the handcuffs on the drug traffickers who threaten the safety of our families and communities. The Trump administration is signaling to the worst of the worst, the drug traffickers who violate our drug laws to move these dangerous substances around our border and into our communities, that the United States Department of Justice will no longer look the other way. This week, the administration has also been busy engaging with senators and their staffs now that the American Health Care Act and the relief it promises for the American people is in the Senate's hands. I know Sarah talked to you yesterday about how Aetna has pulled out of Obamacare exchanges completely, leaving only one insurer in some of the markets. Another report yesterday out from eHealth showed that the average premium for individual plans has spiked 39% since 2014. In some cases, insurance premiums and out-of-pocket expenses have become families' most significant expenses. With each new report, it becomes clearer and clearer that we can't wait any longer to repeal and replace this failing system. Until we enact serious reforms of the healthcare system, the American people will continue to suffer under the consequences. Tomorrow, the President will deliver his first commencement address in Lynchburg, Virginia at Liberty. He is greatly looking forward to visiting with Liberty students and faculty who gave him such a warm welcome last year. He can be expected to note to the graduates his own change in status since they were last together. As many of you know, Liberty is the largest Christian school in the nation and has in recent years made many remarkable strides forward in its academic, extracurricular, and athletic endeavors. Besides taking note of these achievements, the President will be congratulating the graduates on their accomplishments and encouraging them to be a force for good in the world by standing up for their values that Liberty has taught them. He will be offering congratulations, thanks, and praise and encouragement on a day of optimism and new beginnings for the graduates as well as the nation. In terms of the rundown for next week, the President has a very packed schedule before we depart on his first foreign trip. On Monday, he's hosting the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates. On Tuesday, he'll welcome the President of Turkey. On Wednesday, the President will travel to New London, Connecticut to deliver the commencement address at the United States Coast Guard Academy. On Thursday, the President of Colombia will be at the White House for an official visit. And on Friday, we set off on the trip, with the first stop being Saudi Arabia. And finally, in honor of Mother's Day, this afternoon, the First Lady will host a reception in honor of military mothers in the residence, followed by a performance by the Army Chorus and Marine Band. The White House will issue a Mother's Day proclamation later as well. Beyond all of the activity here, this is the official reminder to everyone to get your flowers and cards before it's too late. And with that, Jeff Mason.
Thank you for that reminder, Sean.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the news of the week, really, and the day, did President Trump record his conversations with former FBI Director Comey?
I assume you're referring to the tweet, and I've talked to the President. The President has nothing further to add on that.
Why did he say that? Why did he tweet that? What should we interpret from that?
As I mentioned, the President has nothing further to add on that.
Are there recording devices in the Oval Office or in the residence?
As I said for the third time, there is nothing further to add on that.
Does he think it's appropriate to threaten someone like Mr. Comey not to speak?
I don't think that's not a threat. He's simply stated a fact. The tweet speaks for itself. I'm moving on. John.
If I could quote another one of the President's tweets this morning, he said, quote, "Russia must be laughing up their sleeves watching as the U.S. tears itself apart